Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Prevent Crypto Mining Attacks with Checkpoint Sandblast. My name is Sumi Sharma, Product Marketer here at Checkpoint. I am joined by today's presenters, Maya Horowitz, Head of Threat Intelligence, and Eitan Segal, Principal Product Manager. I would like to remind everyone that today's webinar is interactive and to go ahead and use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. At the end of the presentation, we will be answering your questions live with time permitting, and we will also go ahead and issue a poll at the end of the webinar as well. With further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Maya.
Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here along with Eitan. In this session, we will be talking about cryptocurrency mining. We will start with describing the landscape of crypto miners. We'll then move on to cryptocurrency mining malware and the threat landscape. You'll see why you should care about these attacks, and eventually we will be explaining how you can avoid these attacks and stay safe. You've probably heard about crypto mining all over the news lately, with hackers spreading mining malware in Facebook Messenger, in YouTube advertisements, and even in British government websites. But it's not only on websites. People are getting creative and using all types of platforms to do crypto mining, like these Russian scientists who used a supercomputer in a nuclear plant to mine for Bitcoin. So when we hear all these odd news, we've come to ask ourselves, is it fact or fake news? Is it real or not? Is crypto mining actually the current weapon of choice of threat actors? And the answer is yes. And the reason I'm able to say yes is data, is the fact that here in Checkpoint we have data collected from all over the world, with tens of thousands of gateways, customer gateways reporting back to us with anonymous threat logs, with millions and millions of endpoints, both PCs and mobile devices, reporting to us with the attacks on their platforms, and over 500 million file emulations done per month. So these are this is a huge set of data that allows us to say that today most of these cyber attacks are related to cryptocurrency mining. And the numbers keep growing. You can see that the growth started somewhere along the time when Bitcoin first crossed the $10,000 threshold, and it just kept growing from there. This is probably something that reminded threat actors of the value they can get from these type of attacks. And it's all over the world. This December, we saw that over half of the corporate networks experienced at least one type of crypto mining attack. So let's zoom out and see how this business actually works, how Bitcoin is mined, and what this business looks like. So when we talk about crypto mining, the idea here is that we have transactions in the blockchain, and we need someone to approve these transactions. Now the person to be able to approve the transaction is also awarded with a fee, and that's this fee will be the new Bitcoin, and this person, the miner, will get this new Bitcoin by solving some mathematical problem. Now, more technically speaking, what actually happens is that we have a public ledger or a log of all previous transactions done in the Bitcoin blockchain, and now and there's a cryptographic hash calculated on this block, and then more people want to do transactions in order to pay for some products or services. And every 10 minutes such block is created, and as I said, someone needs to sign on this block and get awarded with 12.5 bitcoins. And again, this person is the miner. So what the miner has to do is to calculate the hash on this new block, which is fairly easy, but this is where it gets complex. So we have these two hashes, and now the challenge of the miner is to take these two hashes and find another set of 32 bits that when added to these hashes will create a new hash that starts with a big set of zeros. So the number of zeros would define how difficult it is to find such a random set of bits. Now this set of 32 bits is called a nonce. So our miner will have to find this nonce, and there is no mathematical way to solve this problem. What he rather has to do is to enumerate over a huge number of possible nonces until he finds the one that fits this specific problem. When he finds a relevant nonce, he's very, very happy because he will now be awarded with that 12.5 bitcoins, and he will now add this nonce to the blockchain, sign these new transactions, and go do some shopping with his new money. So I come from cryptographic background, so I find this very interesting, but I'm pretty sure some of you just dozed off in these last two slides and wonder why all these mathematics. We all know that it recently dropped in its value, and now it's only worth about $7,000. Still, that's big money, and it means that if in every 10 minutes we said that there's a new block created, and this new block will reward the miner with 12.5 bitcoins. What this means is that in every 10 minutes someone's awarded with $84,000. So if we look at it from an yearly perspective, there's $4.4 billion overall in a year, and that's only with Bitcoin. There are many additional types of cryptocurrencies all trying to follow the success of Bitcoin. The leading one, as we've seen in mining activities, is Monero, because this is where it's probably most cost effective currently to do the mining activities. Now, if I was able to convince you that this business is worthwhile, you might find the next few slides beneficial. So while your own PC has fair CPU power and is able to do some mining activity, if you want to be serious about this business, you'd better purchase equipment that was built to excel in the activity of enumerating over hashes. So you can see this one, for example, who can calculate 13 terahashes per second. So if you want to start mining, it might be a good idea to purchase one, and let's hear it from a very happy customer of this product.
These things are all blowing out massive air. Now the cooling in here is so efficient. It is nice ice cold air coming in here. You put your hand in the front, down the center, it is burning, burning hot. So if you're asking yourself, is Bitcoin mining profitable on this scale? Hell yes it is.
Very convincing, right? Yeah. So if to conclude this section, Bitcoin mining, cryptocurrency mining, very big business currently. You can see that Bitcoin mining alone will consume more electricity per year than the entire country of Ireland. In Iceland, they say that they're about to be short in energy because all the electricity goes to cryptocurrency mining, and some people are starting to build data centers that specialize in crypto mining, so they find this business very, very valuable. And what I love most about crypto mining is that it makes people go very, very creative. So you can see this product, for example, and that's a crypto heater. So it's a product that while mining for cryptocurrencies, as you probably know, when the CPU works, the device gets hotter, it releases heat, and this device uses the heat produced by the CPU to just heat a room. So with the same electricity, you get both heat and Bitcoin, so you don't really have to spend any money on heating the apartment. And this is our favorite innovation, and this is a farm that actually grows tomatoes or cryptomatoes based on the heat released from crypto mining. So with this cool idea, we'll move on to Eitan.
Thank you very much, Maya. Hello, everyone. I'm Eitan, and indeed, cryptomatoes are supposed to be extremely delicious and healthy and nutritious. So next time you go to your grocers, make sure you demand cryptomatoes if they are available. But now, seriously, crypto mining, apart from generating a big legitimate industry of business people and innovative people who are investing in data centers, in compute power and electricity in order to try and get a chunk of that billion-dollar rewards, a multi-billion-dollar reward that goes back to successful miners. And there is also a criminal side to cryptocurrency mining. And we're going to talk about that side next. So when we talk about mining attacks, we sometimes refer to them as cryptojacking attacks. You can think from the attacker's perspective as the motto being, in every CPU, there's a hidden miner. So if they can put their hand on a CPU, it doesn't have to be a specialized device. Any CPU that can calculate hashes is good game to try and calculate some of those solutions to the mining puzzles. And of course, the attackers do not intend to invest in hardware, and they do not intend to pay any electricity bills. Instead, they parasite, they try to use other people's hardware. So how does an attacker go about doing something like that? How do you utilize someone else's CPU to run all those CPU-intensive mining calculations? So the most straightforward way, obviously, is to create malware. Malware has been around for decades, and what we've seen happen in past months is attackers have repurposed malwares to mine for cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Monero, and other currencies. The idea is really, really simple. You try to infect an endpoint, or better still, a server, perhaps a cloud server or a data center server. If you can get your malware to run on one of those entities or multiple entities, then that entity now becomes your slave. You can use its CPU power in order to help mine. Of course, the rewards are going to go to the attacker, even though he's using infrastructure of someone else. Another technique that attackers have created in this realm is mining apps. Mobile apps or smartphone apps, and we've seen several dozen such apps pop up on Apple App Store and on Google Play in past months. Apps that seem like legitimate apps. Sometimes they're malicious apps. Sometimes they are compromised apps or infected apps or apps that are using an infected ad system, but the end result is the same. A user installs an app, maybe it looks like a game, maybe it is a game, but in the background that app is going to use the mobile phone's CPU in order to run the mining algorithms. Smartphones are not really built for this sort of very intensive CPU usage. It will cause to drain the battery pretty quickly. It will heat up the devices. We've seen some reports that actually show that the smartphone at some point will deform from the heat when it's subjected to mining apps that are running on it continuously. The last trick that is also extremely common is using JavaScript. JavaScript is the code that's embedded inside web pages, inside the HTML, enables web developers to run code. What hackers are doing are finding ways to penetrate websites and plant mining JavaScript code within those websites. When they succeed in doing that, then all the users who browse to those websites now start mining for the attacker. So these are the three primary ways that attackers are trying to cash in on that multi-billion-dollar industry of cryptocurrency mining. And here's just one example of such a successful hacker who made $3 million by running mining malware on Jenkins servers. So he had discovered a way to penetrate Jenkins servers. Those are servers, business servers that are used for code development. And this is a research that Check Point's research team uncovered and published a few weeks ago. You can find it in our blog. Essentially, we see this attacker mining for up through in this one threat actor's wallet. So just gives you an idea of what's in it for the attackers and what's driving this huge wave of attacks. Now, these attacks go after individuals, they go after business, and let's talk a little bit about how they can impact a business or an organization. And they do this in three primary ways. The first one is through consuming server resources. So when an attacker manages to infect a server, then their mining malware is going to exhaust the server CPU, leading to poor service or denial of service. So mining malware is really thirsty for CPU. That's the primary resource it needs. So they like servers because they tend to have very strong CPUs, and actually the environments they like the most are servers that are hosted on the cloud. Here's two examples. One from the end of February. This was a story about hackers who hijacked Tesla cloud infrastructure in order to mine cryptocurrency. In this case, they had managed to find some credentials into the cloud, gain hold of the cloud, and infect it. Another example of this, a large telco in the United States contacted a couple of months ago our incident response team. Those of you who are not aware of Check Point's incident response team, it's an organization we have that delivers a service to our customers who encounter cyber incidents and help them respond to those incidents. In this case, the customer came to us and said that something had happened with their AWS, their Amazon Web Services account, because they see their monthly bill go up from $10,000 to $100,000, and they're not quite sure what's going on. We've investigated that, and sure enough, our incident response team came up with this analysis. Their servers were actually brute forced, and they found a way into one of the SSH servers by brute forcing passwords. They'd used the weak password. Once they were in, they infected the servers with mining malware. Now, cloud environments have this really great capability to auto-scale, the flexible or elastic capability. So once the mining malware had consumed all the CPU on its first instance, the instance simply replicated itself together with the malware, and this ended up with many, many instances, and of course, a very hefty bill being handed by Amazon to this customer. So consuming server resources is one way this can impact business. Another way is by going after your users. Any user who encounters such an attack is going to have a really horrible experience. The CPU goes up. If it's a mobile device or a laptop, it's going to heat up. The go on your laptop. You're going to experience a lot of slowness and frustration. If you're even browsing the web and you encounter a website that has mining JavaScript in it, and you forget that in one of your tabs, your experience in the browser is going to become very quickly pretty unbearable. So lowering user productivity, of course, this is typically going to end up in some sort of a help desk ticket, is the second issue. Here's an example of what the CPU looks like when someone browses to a website that has a bit of JavaScript that's mining in the background. So you think you're going to watchfree.to, but in fact, what you're getting behind the scene is something that's utilizing your CPU with the crypto mining calculations. The third way we've seen businesses being impacted by this wave of attack is actually by harming reputations and by impacting customer satisfaction. This happens when attackers don't try to install mining malware on your infrastructure, but rather they manage to penetrate a company's server and plant mining JavaScript in that server. And when they do that on a web server, then suddenly all your customers who are browsing to your website are going to be mined potentially or seemingly by you. And that's a very bad experience for your customer and a very bad reputation. Just one headline of quite a few headlines we've seen in the past months. Los Angeles Times, the newspaper website, was injected with Monero cryptocurrency mining script, and took them quite a few weeks to actually realize what was going on and get that cleaned. And you really don't want a headline like that for your business. So just to summarize, we talked about three main business impacts: consuming server resources in your data center, or worse, in your cloud, lowering user productivity and harming reputation and customer satisfaction. But this can actually become worse, because when you think of this, even if you don't care that much about crypto mining, what all of these attacks mean is that an attacker has a foothold, a foot in the door in your network. And perhaps they did this, they were motivated because of the huge financial returns offered by crypto mining. But once the infection is there, attackers will likely move to some other purpose once they are perhaps disenchanted with crypto mining, or maybe they can't find a good way to monetize it. So the same malware can easily, obviously, be repurposed to be a ransomware or a data breach, or any other form of malware. Once an attacker has a foothold on your infrastructure, they can really do anything. So you really want to understand if you've been subjected within your organization to such attacks, because they can lead to far worse attacks. So how do mining attacks actually penetrate an organization? We're going to talk about penetrating through the two entities that exist in any organization. The first one is users. All of us are users. And the second one is systems. So let's start with the users. So attackers go after users in several ways. They can send a malicious email. Perhaps that mail contains malicious attachment that will lead to an infection, or a malicious link that will lead to an infection. Either way, the end user gets infected. The second way is when we browse the internet. Users browse the internet as part of their work, and while they do that, attackers have an opportunity to either infect them, or again, just as a drive-by JavaScript, use their CPU to mine malware. So a lot of infections coming in through the browsing attack vector. The third one is mobile apps. I discussed that a few minutes ago. Manage to upload an infected app to an app store, or infect an app, and now users are going to download that and they're impacted by that mobile app. Next, are the systems. Systems that are exposed. All of your servers, actually all of your endpoints in the cloud, in your data center, anything that has an internet connection is potential game for a hacker. They are going to scan your systems, find their vulnerabilities, and try to penetrate them and install malicious mining on them or embed malicious mining JavaScript in your web servers. And finally, one of the more prevailing ways to get after servers and systems specifically in the cloud, this is the most common way, is by account takeover. So if an attacker can find or can guess credentials to get into a cloud system, then they have full access and they can do whatever they want, like we saw in the Tesla example. So these are the primary ways we see mining attacks penetrating organizations, but actually there's nothing new here. So I know most of the people in these webinars know a lot about cybersecurity, and you can obviously tell that all of these attack vectors are really not new and they're not special for mining. We see the same penetration methods used for virtually all cyber attacks. They will all use some form or combination of all of these above. And really, mining hasn't invented anything. Crypto mining attacks haven't invented anything new in terms of penetration mechanisms. It's just a new way to monetize a successful compromise of a system. So next, I'd like to talk about what can you do in order to prevent mining attacks within your organizations. And the first thing you should probably be thinking about is patching your systems. Patching your systems is always important for mining and for other reasons, and we always encourage that. Unfortunately, patching can be a very, very complex task when you look at all the systems in an enterprise, all the software layers in the servers and clients, on all of your different devices, and finding update windows when you can actually patch them, tracking all the available patches, etc. What we usually see in the real world is that perfect real-time patching is not really something that's achievable. So patch as well as you can, but keep in mind it's usually impractical to be 100% right, or to get it 100% coverage in terms of patching. Also, even if you do patch perfectly, it's not going to protect you against zero-day vulnerabilities that have no patches available, and it's not going to protect you from human weaknesses that are exploited through social engineering. In order to really combat these cyber attacks, what you need is technology. And the first technology you should be thinking about is intrusion prevention systems, or IPS. And IPS gives you a layer of virtual patching. It means that you don't need to constantly chase all of your systems, all of your servers, all of your software layers to understand if they're hardened or patched. Instead, IPS is going to, in real time, give you a virtual patching on the network, meaning that attackers can't access your users and can't access your systems with attacks that are trying to exploit known vulnerabilities in your systems. And by employing an IPS on your network, you're going to protect both your users and your systems. At Check Point, we've put a lot of emphasis in the past months with the huge rise in mining attacks on making sure that our IPS has complete coverage for all the forms of the attacks that we're seeing. So protecting users who are going to websites that contain mining JavaScript, protecting all of your servers and endpoints that may have vulnerabilities that are exploited by mining attacks. Of course, mining is just a small part of what IPS protects you from, and you should be using IPS against all forms of attacks. But IPS, we need to keep in mind, is a signature-based technology. It will be very effective in preventing attacks that we've seen, but with the financial gain that crypto miners have, they are looking for new evasive ways to get past those protections. And in order to combat that, we really need a stronger set of protections. So the next layer of advanced protections is a protection that can give you zero-day prevention from unknown attacks, from sophisticated attacks that may bypass traditional and conventional signature-based technologies. Checkpoint Sandblast is our technology. For that, I believe many of you know Sandblast, but a quick reminder what Sandblast consists of. So technologically, Sandblast has two main elements, threat emulation and this very, very powerful evasion-resistant sandbox technology. And we combine threat emulation with threat extraction, a proactive approach that delivers clean files, sanitized files to users. And by combining these two elements, a proactive approach that means that only clean files are entered the organization, with threat emulation that can identify zero-day and unknown malware that is attempting to enter your network, you can get a very strong coverage for the unknown element of cyber attacks in general and of crypto mining attacks in particular. Sandblast has many other technologies I've put here on this slide: anti-ransomware, forensics, zero phishing, and there's also anti-exploit and many more. It's beyond the scope of what we can discuss today, but a whole range of technologies that all specialize in dealing with the unknown element of attacks. Sandblast as a product family is designed to cover your entire IT infrastructure. So Sandblast is available on all of our network gateways, and it will protect your mail, your users who are browsing the web, and your data centers. Sandblast Agent on endpoint will give you direct advanced protections for all of your endpoints and integrated protections for the browsers within the endpoint, because we know that web browsing is such a fundamental way of being exploited and attacked. And Sandblast is also a core part of our CloudGuard solution, and which covers both software as a service and infrastructure as a service. So all of your different cloud assets can also be covered by Sandblast. And last but not least, Sandblast Mobile is going to give you coverage for iOS and Android against all forms of known and unknown mobile attacks. And we also have an API with Sandblast, which means that you can integrate the capabilities of Sandblast with any business process or business logic that you have that isn't strictly covered by the other form factors I mentioned earlier. So Sandblast is really a very broad solution. And one last thing you should think about, or it's important for me to note about protecting or preventing mining attacks, and that's the account takeover I mentioned earlier. As I said, a lot of these attacks go after the cloud because of the very strong compute power and the dynamic scalability of the cloud. What we've done with CloudGuard is a new technology that prevents account takeover. We do this by linking a user to a device. And then we can intercept the user when the user attempts to access a cloud, a software as a service or infrastructure as a service cloud entity, and validate not just the user credentials, but that the device matches the user who's giving those credentials. And only if we can match those two elements will we grant access to the cloud. By doing this, we allow users to continue using their familiar age-old username and password, and while hackers are still locked out of the system, even if they manage to obtain or to guess a set of credentials. And that's pretty fundamental in general, and especially important in mining because of the particular liking that mining attacks have to cloud environments. So that concludes what you need to do with prevention, but some of you at this point might be wondering, what if you're already infected? Maybe your network has already been hit by a mining attack. How can you know, and what should you do about it? So one way The difficult way is to start monitoring the CPUs on all the devices, all the servers, all the endpoints and mobile devices in your network. And look for anomalies. If you see anything that's using too much CPU, then you need to go and investigate. Probably not the most practical approach to solve this challenge. What we recommend is resolving this or addressing this by intercepting mining command and control communications. So every mining malware is ultimately going to communicate back to the hacker and actually also back to the blockchain in order to submit solutions to puzzles and to get new puzzles. And those communications can be detected and can be blocked. And we do this in Check Point with our anti-bot technology. And when we successfully manage to do that, we're going to do two things. First of all, we stop the mining activity. And secondly, we can alert you to an infected host on your network. So here on the right, you can see an example of a CPU skyrocketing on an endpoint that was infected by an XMRig mining malware. And once we turned on anti-bot on the network, you can see what happened to the CPU. The malware was simply unable to communicate and stopped utilizing the CPU because it became futile without its communication back to the hacker. So one of the things we've done with anti-bot over the past month is really track down all of the mining command and control channels and made sure that we have excellent coverage so that if you're using anti-bot, we can first of all stop the mining activity and secondly create that log and alert that you can act upon in order to identify a compromised system. Of course, anti-bot, like all the other technologies I showed you, isn't specific to mining. It's a generic protection that will help you as a post-infection protection against all forms of compromise and malware that's infected your systems. Okay, it's time for us to summarize. So the broadest, most general way, if there are three things I would like you to recall from today's discussion, you should always patch your systems. It's going to help you as well as you can do that. Avoid a lot of these attacks. Please implement advanced protection technologies. These protections are designed to help prevent known and unknown attacks, mining attacks, and all other forms of cyber attacks, and make sure that your protections cover all the IT elements of your organizations, your endpoints, your network, your cloud entities, your mobile devices, etc. And really there's the discussion here, the topic here is mining, but the same principles exactly are the principles that you should be applying in your general goal of preventing all forms of cyber attacks on your organization. A bit more specifically, again to summarize, we spoke earlier about these three forms of mining attacks: mining malware, mining mobile apps, and JavaScript, mining JavaScript embedded in websites. So I've listed here the technologies, the specific technologies you can use in order to block and mitigate each of them. For mining malware, it's going to be SandBlast on your network and on your endpoints, and IPS on your network, and there's a post-infection protection anti-bot. For mining apps on smartphones, you should be using SandBlast Mobile and anti-bot, again, as a mitigating factor for post-infection. And finally, for the JavaScript attack vector, SandBlast Network, IPS, and again, anti-bot. So this kind of gives you an overview of the technologies you should be using for each of these elements. Again, all of these technologies are completely generic. We've hardened them and made sure that they cover mining attacks, but they are in no way specific to just mining, so you should be using them regardless. So again, a reminder on the SandBlast product family that's available on the network, the endpoint, cloud, SaaS and infrastructure as a service, and mobile, and the API. So really do take the opportunity to utilize these technologies across your infrastructure and make sure you leave no way for attackers to penetrate your organization. So with that, I think it's time for us to take some answers. We have a few answers here, a few questions, to take some questions. So we have a few questions, and while we do that, I'm going to pull up a poll, a very quick polling exercise. You should see it on your screens right now. I'd appreciate if you take a minute or two to, even half a minute to answer the poll while we'll take a look at the questions. If you have any questions, this is the time to hit the Q&A section at the bottom panel, and you can shoot those questions at us. Maya and I will try to address them. Okay, so somebody's asking, is mining illegal? Is mining illegal? I'm not a law expert, but I think mining is legal in most parts of the world. I've seen some efforts to make mining illegal in some parts of the US recently. And this is all of the entire challenge around mining is very, very new, and I think the legal system hasn't really had an opportunity to address it, the legal and political system to address it completely. Another question is crypto mining illegal? If I browse to a website and that website is mining JavaScript on my browser, is that website a criminal website or not? I'm not sure there's a clear answer to that either. To me, this sounds like a kind of borderline situation, but it's an interesting question. So there are definitely a few interesting legal questions around this topic.
I see here a question regarding CoinHive. So CoinHive is actually one type of a JavaScript that enables doing everything that Eitan just presented, all the mining through websites. So the most prevalent tool used for that is called CoinHive, and CoinHive was actually added as a feature to WordPress lately, to enable people who own WordPress websites to add the CoinHive miner to the code, meaning that everyone who visits the website is being leveraged for the mining activity. So yeah, this is one of these tools, very, very prevalent today. And of course, it again brings up the question of the legitimacy, because if there's this script in a website, you just visit the website and someone unknowingly uses your CPU power. Is this legal? Is this not? And I know that CoinHive got famous with the attack on with Pirate Bay, who used it instead of advertisements as means to earn money from the visitors. So in that case, they actually, well, eventually they announced it, but so the question here is whether or not you announce the user that they're being used for the mining. Now,
okay, I'll take this one. Is it possible to crypto mine with regular home PC? Absolutely. So any machine with a CPU is game for mining. If you have a home PC, you can use it. You can buy a dedicated PC that has an ASIC for calculating hashes more efficiently, but you can do it on your home PC, on your mobile phone, or any device that can calculate hashes.
I see another question here about who are the legitimate miners. So the interesting thing here is that everyone's a legitimate miner. That's the principle around which the blockchain idea is built. So anyone is allowed to give a hand and mine for cryptocurrencies, and illegitimacy comes into the picture the minute you use someone else's CPU without them knowing for the mining. So no, there is no reason to ask for authentication in order to be mining, because everyone's valid for that matter.
Okay, there's multiple questions about are we going to submit a recording of this webinar? The answer is yes, we will be within the next few days sending you all out a link to a recording of the webinar. And someone's here noted us that that in some countries mining is indeed illegal, so that's good to know. Let's see some of the more questions that are out here. There are quite a few.
A question here about whether or not it's profitable to use malware to mine specifically for Bitcoin. And indeed, this is much less profitable because by now there are not too many Bitcoins left to mine, so the complexity of these puzzles is getting harder and harder, and simple PC would not be very helpful here. And so this is why most threat actors today, or even most people who do mining, would do the mining for Monero. So most of the attacks, I'd say 90-something% of the attacks that we see today are attacks targeting the Monero blockchain.
Okay, here's another question. Are 700 series appliances with SandBlast protected against crypto mining? So yes, 700 series run the same code as, or the same protections rather, as our full enterprise appliances. So if you're using SandBlast and IPS and Antibot, you're getting the same level of protection on these smaller appliances, so you should and can use them to prevent also crypto mining attacks. Okay, what about CPU performance? Will there be any impact on the performance of the device? Stefan is asking. So yes, absolutely. As we said, if anyone manages to get hold and use your computer, the main thing you're going to see is a degradation in the available CPU, because mining is all about consuming CPU power. So yes. What other interesting questions do we have here? Okay, how do we take a corrective steps to our infected systems? How do you protect using the SandBlast and Checkpoint firewall? So there's two parts for this. How do you protect? I think we showed all the slides that talk about how to protect and the different technology that will protect. If you have an infected system that's already doing mining, and you can know that in multiple ways, but really one of the easiest ways to actually find out is to use Antibot. If your other software hasn't managed to pick it up and detect or prevent it, and if something is compromised, what do you do then? So apart from blocking the command and control, you're going to have to forensically understand what's in there and try to clean it up. Either re-image the device, or what we usually prefer is to use the Checkpoint forensic analysis, part of our endpoint. It could do automatic remediation and also give you an indication of exactly what this malware was up to. But it all goes back to standard kind of incident response and malware cleaning paradigms.
To the question regarding Chrome browser extensions, so yes, this is also beneficial to use these extensions. The thing is that most of them work on blacklists of specific URLs used for on which some miner is running. So they do help, but you still rather have some more advanced technologies that use signatures that would find any website using these techniques rather than a closed list.
Okay, there's a question here about the differences between threat defense and AMP, so Cisco AMP and SandBlast. And this is not a competitive session, so I'm not going to go into how these products differ. I'll refer all of you to our various collateral and assets and what we do that is unique in terms of evasion resistance, CPU level, the use of threat extraction together with the sandbox and many other differentiating features. But right now this is a bit beyond the scope of this session. Okay, I think we have, let's see if what other questions that are, okay, someone's asking if mining is more profitable with GPU and ASIC. So yes, usually mining depends on, I think, on the exact coin, but and there have definitely been ASICs developed that specialize in mining. Okay, I think we've covered the main questions that came up here. We'd like to thank all of you for attending today. Simi, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I would like to go ahead and first of all thank our wonderful presenters, Maya and Eitan, for conducting today's webinar. Also, a huge thank you to all the attendees for joining us today and participating in the Q&A. As a quick reminder, we will be sending an email shortly with a link to replay the webinar. Please do, of course, join us for future webinars, and thank you for joining today. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.